Hi everyone, for tonight's Nightcap and review, I'm having water and I will be discussing Earl's Trip by Jenny Holiday. I did receive this book as an ARC from NetGalley, but of course I'm going to give my honest opinion. These are the tropes and these are the content warnings. They aren't listed in a book. These are just things I found to make you aware of what you will read as you read this book. I will say there is misogyny in this book that is appropriate for the time reference, the 19th century Regency time. So keep that in mind. I forgot to put that on there because that's what I expect from that kind of time window. So what are my thoughts, or what's my rating for this book? I will say I bumped around on the rating. At one point I was 3.5, next 3.75, and at one point I almost DNF'd this book. So I was bouncing around, but I finally landed on 3.75. We'll get into that later. Let's discuss what this book's about. So this book is about Lord Archibald, an Earl of Harcourt, I think it was, who is about to go on a boys' trip with his two best friends. So it's the Earl's boy trip. And as he's leaving and on the road with his friends, they are flagged down by a rider with a letter for Lord Archibald, from his late father's best friend. Their families were really close as they were growing up. He was best friends with the eldest daughter, Clementine, as they were growing up, but they lost touch in recent years. So he's really surprised to be getting flagged down with a urgent letter from his father's best friend. Turns out he is bedridden with gout and needs Archie's help. His daughters have run off to Scotland. The youngest ran off with a man to get married in Scotland, but that man is the fiance to the eldest daughter, Clementine. And once she found out what her younger sister had done, she dressed as a boy, got on a mail coach, and is tracking them down to Scotland to try and stop and save her sister. So Lord Archie is, first of all, surprised all of that is happening, but is like, this was my best friend growing up. I am loyal. I don't care that we lost touch. I'm going to track them down and do my best to get them both home safely. So they take another detour, or they take a detour to try and track down these girls. Thankfully, they are able to find them, and the girls kind of rescued themselves, almost, sort of. And some things happen, some antics, but eventually everyone is safe. Once everyone is all together and everyone is safe, Lord Archie sends a letter back to their father saying, I've got them, they're safe, but I'm not going to put off my boys' trip. So they're coming with us to this castle. They'll be kept separate. Everything will be kosher. You're good. So they go on, head to the castle to start their boys' trip. So when they get there, he starts to reconnect with Clementine and starts to realize that he really should never have lost touch with her, and that they need start to reconnect on a really deep level. And he starts to learn who she is as an adult woman, because he saw her last, I think it was 18, and now she's like in her old age of 20s. And she's a new person. So he's rediscovering her, and it's starting to stir feelings in him. And he is just conflicted about his best friend and these feelings and what they mean for his future, because as they've grown closer, Clementine has also started to feel things about their friendship, and feels a sense of trust in him, that she has a very interesting proposal, a proposal that leaves him shaken. So he starts to wonder what that means for them and their friendship, and again, his future. So what are my thoughts on this book? Again, I was very conflicted as to what to rate this book. I eventually landed on 3.75. I think the main thing is that this book was described as Ted Lasso meets The Bridgerton meets The Hangover. And I do apologize, I don't quite know the Ted Lasso reference. Don't come for me in the comments. I understand the Bridgerton one. For that, I think the sexual tension, I think comedic moments, and just the flair of that, of the Regency time. Not just Regency, but most I think of like building sexual tension, and again, those comedic moments to uplift or break that tension, however you want to put it. And then The Hangover, boys' trip, crazy antics, wild ride. And I will say the book starts to meet those expectations, especially with kind of the Hangover vibes of like the antics and what was happening. It did meet that vibe. Wasn't necessarily getting Bridgerton, but I was expecting that later in the book as they got to the castle. The beginning met like the expectations, like I said. The middle hit a real slow lull for me. It was just didn't meet either of those expectations for me. It was just a very slow lull. But I stuck with it. And I will say the ending did pick up. It never quite met those references for me, but I would say that the Bridgerton, I got more of that feeling towards the end, especially at the end with this last final scene that actually did make me tear up a little bit, which is what bumped it from a 3.5 to a 3.75 at the end. So the beginning and the end, I did enjoy that. The middle did hit a real lull where I was like, okay, So I will say another thing is that I almost DNF'd this book. I was at 70%, and that's why I ended up pushing on. But there was one moment when the female main lead says something that I didn't quite vibe with. And I was like, I've hit this lull. I don't like this, what I'm interpreting from this passage. I think I'm going to bow out. But I was like, I'm at 70. I'm going to finish it. So what it is, the scene is built up where he is telling her that he is respecting her boundaries and her wish to never get married, and she's shocked by this. And so her inner dialogue is that, and I understand what the author was trying to do with this. She says, or she thinks, is she was tempted to point out that just because a woman has aversions or preferences for that matter, it didn't mean that a man need heed them. In fact, most men found that aversions and preferences of women to be completely irrelevant. The last line, I totally get what she's trying to say and what's going on. It totally meet the vibe that in this time, she is very used to men not listening to her. It's the other part where she said, the part of it, it didn't mean that a man need heed them. How I'm interpreting that is very much of her thinking that it comes off of don't just accept her no. She really means yes, and a woman is just playing hard to get. That's how I interpret it. And that doesn't quite fit with what the passage is. The last sentence did, but reading that, especially from a female main character, just gave me a little bit of an ick. But like I said, I pushed on and I did enjoy the ending of the book. I will also say I loved Lord Archie in this book. He was very progressive for his time, always checking in, getting consent, respecting boundaries, loved him. He would be even considered progressive for this time, sadly. And the female main character, Clementine Clem, I liked her. I didn't love her because she is a vegetarian and she is very strict in her views that even when she had the option to eat with the boys later on, she didn't want to eat with the boys because they ate meat and she didn't want to watch others eating meat. And Archie, who is a avid hunter, it's like his big stress relief. And he's not a sport hunter, like he's just unaliving a deer to mount its head. He eats his, trophies, or I don't know what terminology, but he does eat it. So it's not going to waste. He is eating for sport, but eats the food. So I consider that a little different than sport hunting. But every time he's trying to talk about how this is important to him, she's kind of arguing with him about why he would why do this. It is not right, and how unethical it is. So she's the type of vegetarian where she is very strong in her viewpoints and at times doesn't attack people, but makes her wishes known and tries to steer people away from it. So I think the main issue for me with this book is that the vibes I was expecting as I went into this book weren't quite met. But that's just my opinion. Reading is subjective, and I always encourage other people, if this sounds like a book you would be interested in, give it a try. It will be available tomorrow, April 23rd. So give it a try, form your own opinion, because it may be the book for you, and I love that for you. So I hope everyone has a good night and happy readings.